Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. Ruth is a visiting professor at a large university in Ireland, and Claire is an associate professor at a primarily undergraduate university in Northern California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss. Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Claire.
And I'm Ruth. And today we're talking about giving seminars. But before we do that, Claire, how was your week?
My week was great. One of the bands I'm in, called the Oyster Baes, released an album recently, and we've been really excited to have that out. We were working on it. So I'm on sabbatical right now. Ralph and I are out of the normal town, so we're not hanging out with the other members of the Oyster Baes. So we finished recording it in the nick of time before we left for sabbatical, and then we've been getting artwork ready, and anyway, it just came out, and so we're really excited. And so I will put links in the show notes for any interested listeners. It's kind of like, we call it folkestral rock because it's like folky, but we have some orchestra instruments like cello and clarinet. And it's kind of rocky. We just couldn't decide on a genre, so we put them together.
Just make your own genre.
Yeah.
Yes, and I recommend everyone has a listen because it's amazing. So good
thank
job.
you, Ruth.
I can't imagine what kind of job or work that is. It must be huge.
It's so much fun. I really enjoyed all of our sessions at the recording studio.
Cool. It's just like you're talking about a magical event or something. That's how close. Do you know what I mean? It's like a fairy tale. The thought of being in a musical studio. Anyway, my week was good. Kind of because we've just come through spooky season. The girls decided we were going to give it a try to watch Goosebumps, the movie. And when we watched it, we talked about, like, in the movie, it's clear that it's based on a series of books.
Okay.
And I just must have missed those because they started coming out in the early 90s. And I think they hadn't quite come to Ireland when I would have been ready for them. And then by the time, anyway, so I didn't engage with Goosebumps at all. So we liked the movie, and then we started reading about the books and looking up the books. And then the girls were like, let's listen to one of the books. So we got a book on Audible. It was terrifying. Like, oh my God, dude. I was like, I couldn't sleep one night. Like, I was so scared. So I was like, wow, okay. And it was like only the first one. And even reading some of the titles are like, they're so scary. They're really good because they're chilling, but they're definitely like a whole other level. And there was one, I was doing a lab the other day and I had a PhD student who was there helping. I was like, did you read Goosebumps? And he was like, oh my God. And then he started talking about one called Say Cheese and Die. And it's about like this haunted camera that like shows you terrible things. I was like, oh my God, this is wild. So anyway, the girls were like, we're not ready. So we're not going to listen to a Goosebumps. We're going to try again next year and see.
Good idea.
But we even had to delete it out of the library in Audible because they were like, I don't want to see the picture anymore. So it was too scary. We're not ready for Goosebumps.
I remember when Goosebumps, there was a phase when I was the age for Goosebumps and all my friends were reading Goosebumps and I just looked at the covers and was like, no, thank you. Not interested.
See, this is like, I have so much admiration for people who can be like, this is too scary for me. I'm just like, wow, maybe this isn't, like, maybe I can handle this. And I did learn with horror movies, like, I cannot watch horror movies at all. And so at least I know that much about myself, but I just can't help myself because I'm like, but what's the story? Like sometimes I'll even look up and read the story of a horror movie. I can't watch it, but I'm just really nosy about what's happening. So
Sure.
Unfortunately, my kids have inherited that affliction. So yeah, it's a curse. I
think it's fun. I mean, that's one of the allures, I guess, is that it's scary and you're pushing your boundaries by exploring that fear. So that's cool.
Well, and it's good. It's cool that there's age appropriate ones because when I was like a young teen, I was reading Stephen King and stuff, and that was not age appropriate. So they're spooky, but they're not like they're right. I mean, they're maybe a bit too scary, but they're appropriate for the age. So anyway, we're not ready for Goosebumps, apparently.
Well, now you know.
Yeah. I live and learn. But tell me, do you have a quote for us this week?
I do. And I've actually already given this quote at one point on the podcast,
Brilliant.
But it just seemed like it was time to bring it back. And so it's a classic Jen Sincero. She says, It's the people who make enjoying their lives a priority who actually enjoy their lives. And I just wanted that little reminder for everybody that we can prioritize that.
I love that. And so do you know the way you gave this quote before? Does it land differently for you this time? Or is it just, it's always like your touchstone, like it always... Do you know what I mean?
I think it's a touchstone. I think it lands similarly.
Yeah.
It's just a reminder.
I love it. Brilliant. So today we're talking about giving seminars. And so you're kind of fresh off the seminar experience. So do you want to start us off?
Sure, yeah. So I just gave a seminar last week at CSUN, California State University, Northridge. And so I was really excited to reflect on what I learned from giving that seminar. It was actually my first seminar. I've given seminars in our university, but not seminars at another university before. So it was my first time doing that. And I guess I just have 2 lessons that I learned from the experience that I wanted to share with y'all.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah. So I'll just pick the first one. When I was thinking about, obviously you create your seminar thinking about the audience. Everyone always says, make the presentation to the audience. But what I hadn't really thought about until getting ready for this seminar is what a range of possibilities of audience there are, even giving a seminar at another university. So this one was in a geological sciences department, and I'm in a chemistry department, I do ocean chemistry, so it's related, the geology people think about the earth, and ocean people think about the earth, but I don't have as much background on what the geology experience is, like what do geology majors think about. So I don't know, it's framing my research through the lens of touching all the parts of geology that it interacts with a little more solidly than I might normally, being sure to make the geology connections clear, being sure to explain the chemistry and oceanography background a little more, was kind of an interesting lens for me to think about that.
That makes me so anxious, though.
Yeah.
Because it's like... Because then if you had to talk about the geology stuff... Okay, so I'm glad you're a confident, reasonable person. You're not like this. But I'm like, oh my God, what if you got the geology stuff wrong? Or what if you're saying... Like, that would make me so anxious. So, did that come up for you at all when you were preparing? Obviously, it went really well. But were you like...
Sure. I guess it did... I did think about... Yeah... making sure that I was using the terminology in geology completely correctly was something I maybe wouldn't have worried about as much if the audience wasn't geologists. Not because I don't want to be accurate, but because they would know what the words mean, really, with their accurate and precise definitions. So I need to be sure to use those extracurricularly. Yeah. But again, I'm telling the story of my research with oceanography and chemistry. I'm just trying to make it understandable and relatable to this particular audience that has a geological background more than the audiences I normally speak to.
I did a math seminar once in Humboldt, and I was so freaked out because I feel like physicists use maths in a really sketchy way sometimes, and we do stuff for mathematicians who are like, that's not actually accurate. And you're like, it's fine, don't worry about it, because you're trying to do something with it. And so I was really anxious that I was like mortally offending people with my ham-fisted math explanations. But
totally.
I got out of there okay, so it was fine. But yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I was going to start out, I felt like we should start with rocks. And then I was like, oh, but maybe I shouldn't make a joke about rocks, because maybe geologists are always hearing about how, I don't know, they study rocks, and they do study more than rocks, and I don't know all the geology in lingo. And then I was like, okay, I'll just say, let's start with geology. And anyway, it was fine. Okay, so I guess what I'm saying is, so the range of audience is bigger than expected. Of course, it varies based on the discipline of the department you're talking to. But then when I also learned the balance of undergraduates versus graduates versus faculty that you're expecting in the seminar. Like, are you targeting it at undergrads? Are you targeting it at faculty? What's the purpose of the seminar series? And I hadn't really realized, of course, different departments might have different points to the seminar series. Is it to impart the latest cutting-edge research? Is it to show undergraduates an example of a seminar? Is it to broaden the topics that we have discussed in this department? What is the purpose? And so I don't know, that was just another thought. Like that will affect whether I give more background information. Am I giving them a lot of background information that's related to my research because they are learning about this new area of field and that's really interesting? Or should I be giving them more? Should I give the bare minimum of that and give the bulk of the time on the cutting edge new stuff that is the frontier of research? You know, those are different things. And I think both would be very reasonable to expect. And it's just different depending on what your audience is. So that's an example of I hadn't really realized how broad the audience might, how broad the range of options for the audience is, and how much that would shift my talk just from department to department or university to university. So that was really interesting to think about just when I was thinking about this particular department at this particular university.
See, that's really interesting because I gave a seminar in our chemistry department where you are from, and I really appreciated the person organizing it was like, the purpose of this is to give the students who are about to do their senior project an example of a seminar. And I was like, oh, great, okay. And I didn't even think about it at the time, but now that you're saying it, that helped me so much with figuring out how to structure it. And that was really helpful, yeah.
Totally. All right, so tell me some of your thoughts about seminars.
So yeah, my thoughts about seminars are, I think they're like super, again, much like what we talked about before in other episodes, like something that I dread and then it ends up being super fun and it's always really good. I think it can kind of depend, right? Because I've given a few seminars in like other departments at our university and then a couple at other universities. And then lately I've been applying for some jobs, and a lot of jobs lately have involved giving a presentation of some description, which is like a different kind of, I mean, it's not a seminar, but like it's doing a presentation. And sometimes I find talking to people you don't know kind of liberating, and then in other ways it's absolutely terrifying. So I don't know.
I so agree.
Yeah, because sometimes it's like I find it almost harder to talk to people I do know because you're trying, like you feel ridiculous putting on a persona of like, I don't know, but sometimes it's really nice because you know, like say, like what you were talking about a little bit there, like where to pitch it. And you've such a strong feeling of where the students in your department are at and what would be good for them. And then going into somewhere you've like literally no idea what people are expecting. Like it's both liberating and extremely difficult. So yeah. And I think, and it's really worth it obviously for putting on your CV and for your tenure file and all of those things. We haven't mentioned the old tenure file in a while, so I'm just bringing that back.
We haven't. I'm glad you brought it back up. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's such a great opportunity and can be quite liberating. That's what I would say. I have many more things in the working on.
I totally agree with your point about how in some respects it's easier to talk to people you know, and in other respects it's harder. And there was definitely a phase when I was preparing for this seminar where I was like, man, if I was presenting this to my department, I'd be done. But because I'm presenting to this more unknown group of people, I'm not done. And the difference is, that I don't have as good an understanding of where they're at, and that we don't have this background between us where they know something of who I am and what I work on, and we don't have a rapport to build on. You know, this is the beginning of the rapport. So that was really interesting.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I learned that I thought was really interesting was I kind of assumed until this seminar that when you're invited to give a seminar, that's the main thing. You're giving a seminar, you're presenting about your work, and that is the main goal. And then as long as you're here, you'll meet with some other people in the department. But when I was there, I was feeling like actually the main thing is that we're connecting across our universities and we're seeing what potential collaborations there could be in research or in teaching. We're seeing what kinds of, maybe some of our students would want to do a master's there or vice versa. We're kind of looking for potential connections across our departments, potential collaborations, potential ways we could work together. And that, I think, is actually the main point. And the seminar is kind of an excuse for that.
Yeah.
The seminar is presenting to everybody and opening the door for some connections. But really, you're meeting individuals and you're talking about, oh, wow, you do that with your incoming freshmen to help them feel community. That's really interesting. We do it this way. Let's discuss that. Or, oh, how interesting. I had no idea you could study this in that way. Maybe we could do a collaboration or something like that. So actually, the potential seeds for future work together seems to me to be the main important thing, and the seminar is just a way to make that happen. So that was really interesting. It kind of totally reset my impression of the purpose and like the goals of this event. So that was really interesting.
Dude, that's so interesting, right? Because it makes me think of, like, you know, in the pandemic, and you're like, oh my God, we can have some randomer from New Zealand do a seminar. And it's totally true, and it's great that the Zoom option is an option. But then, yeah, is it missing out on all of those other parts and the fact that you're hanging out in the campus for the day?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Like, is it, you know what I mean? So, like, that's super interesting, just all of those connections and stuff. Mm-hmm. That is really important.
Totally. And so what are you working on?
I think, I don't know, like, does the fear ever really go away? I mean, like, when I think back, like, obviously, like, my whole policy of giving a talk was to just memorize the words. Mm-hmm. And I've definitely moved past that somewhat, but it's still the fear, like, I think I only do it if I'm really backed into a corner in some way. Do you know what I mean? And, like, there's times where, do you know the whole tenure process? Where you're like,
yes.
I wish it wasn't like this. But then it's great in some ways because it really forced me out of my comfort zone in so many aspects. And one of them was when the math department's like, do you want to give a seminar? And you're like, absolutely not. No, there's nothing I'd rather do less. But then you do it, right? So that you have it, you know, it looks really good to do. And then it turns out to be a good thing and you get better at it. So that, I think, is that, and just kind of rallying yourself to do it. But the other thing, it kind of, I think, speaks a little bit to what you were saying. Just seminars in general. I've been having a lot of thoughts about seminars and the targeting of seminars. And, like, it's super cool to have a weekly seminar, but is it? Like, I don't know. Like, the range of talks is so varied that sometimes you go and you're like, I can't follow. It's so specific. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? And then other times. So I think what I would think about with seminars is, like, maybe if they're super targeted to, like you said, like, really clear direction of this is who you're talking to. Like, don't come here with your talk that you did at a conference that was about your specific thing. Like, please come and talk to a really general audience. Do you know what I mean? Or, yeah, so I think that, like, I wish that it was targeted in that way, and then you get that information if you're giving a seminar, like, this is the level that you're pitching it to. And then even just as someone attending seminars, I don't know, it's tricky. Like, would it be better for a department to have one seminar that they're like, this is it, everyone should come to this, it's going to be so great, we really picked this because of X, Y, and Z? Or, do you know what I mean? So, I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. I liked your comparison to, okay, so somebody's given a talk at a conference, and of course, usually at the conference, it's a really focused group on some very particular topic, and you only have 12 minutes or something to talk about it. It seems to me like we could still cover that content. We just need 40 minutes or 30 minutes of context to get the introduction so that we're all on board for understanding that really impactful, more recent 12 minutes. I guess I'm hesitating slightly because I think there is a ton of value to bringing that cutting edge stuff. And of course, not everyone will have the context to understand every seminar if it is all cutting edge stuff. But on the other hand, I feel like we could maybe if there was enough introduction. And I really I think it's valuable to bring all this varied cutting edge content. One thing that I found really interesting, so when I first was planning my seminar, I was thinking, oh gosh, nobody does ocean chemistry in this department. I feel like maybe my talk is going to be so far out of line with what they're normally thinking of that it'll just feel out of the blue and not make any sense. But then I had a little bit of a reframing while I was there and thinking, well, for some people who maybe would be interested, this could be extra exciting that it's outside the things that the department's normally thinking about. So anyway, I value that breadth that we can get from having lots of seminars, but I see what you're saying of they need to actually draw the audience. They need...
I feel like
if they're not drawing the audience, then there's a problem.
You're so good at identifying things, because I feel like this is the game we play where I just ramble and then you figure out what I meant. But like, the thing that you just said is, I think it would be great if you could say to a seminar person coming, say, you're going to need to do like 40 minutes of introduction, but they will really want to hear about XYZ, which is why we're inviting you, but you're going to need to like build, you know what I mean? Or just like instructions like that, which I don't know how that would land with people, if that's like annoying to people, but I would love to hear that. Like if someone told me, these are the people you're talking to, this is what we want to hear from you, I would love that. That would be great.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it kind of comes back to what's the point of the seminar series, and I guess making sure that everyone, the organizers, the attendees, and the speakers all have the same concept of what the point is, and then maybe that would go optimally.
Totally.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, what else are you thinking about, other things that you're working on?
Just thinking about, like, I guess that's the other thing I haven't ever done is like really talking to the public about anything physics-wise. And so that's something that scares me half to death, is the thought of that. And we had like a great series in Humboldt where we were the Science on Tap, which was in a local bar. And it's like, I went to a few of them and they were so great and it was open to the public. There is no way I would do that. Like I would literally, oh my God, it was just the thought of it stressed me out so much. And I'm not entirely sure why.
I'm so interested because I feel like it. So I did a Science on Tap and I did a talk at the Exploratorium in San Francisco, and both of those were to a general audience. And I kind of found it liberating because it's about telling an interesting story within my research. It's not necessarily about the data that came off the press last week. It's about it being interesting and fun. And I feel like I have a better understanding of what might be interesting and fun. I don't know. I mean, that's just, I don't know. It feels relatable to me. So I'm interested that you're finding that extra scary, because I find that kind of liberating.
I think like I find it scary because, I think I find it scary partly, like I'm sort of scared of popular science. Do you know what I mean? And you know, when people have like, there's certain like hot topics in physics and I don't know anything about them. Do you know what I mean? Like people are like, oh, the particle accelerator. And you're like, yeah, and I don't know anything about that. So,
oh, I see.
I think I'm always worried things are going to end up in a direction that I can't contribute. And like I see other physicists who can just casually switch to talking about like rocket ship design. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't do that. So maybe that's what it is.
That's a good point.
I think it feels like it could go anywhere. Do you know what I mean? And that, I think...
It totally does.
I'm too uptight or something. But then, like you said, like... I think you said this to me when I mentioned something similar to this. And you were like, you still know more than most people about it. And I don't know why I just don't, like... And anytime it's happened, like, that's turned out to be true. But I don't have confidence in just, like... just freewheeling, chatting about physics. Like, I don't know what that is. It just, like, really freaks me out. So, yeah.
I totally, that's a really good point. And that is kind of scary. I mean, whenever I mention metals in the ocean, the one that most people are most familiar with is mercury and eating it in tuna. And I don't know anything about mercury.
Okay, that's Tell me more about
this. So I totally agree with you about how it's much more likely to go anywhere. Something that somebody's heard of could be something totally unexpected to me, but I can see how it relates to the talk after the fact, but I haven't thought at all about this topic. I do agree with what you said that I said, which is that we do actually know more about it. Even though I'm not an expert in mercury, I do know that it bioaccumulates in fish, and I have a thought or two about it that I can share. But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, that's a good point. And that is a scary aspect, is the potential questions could be so left field from what you expect in like a research academic setting. But I feel like if I just have a go-to, that's outside my expertise, but here are my thoughts.
You know what? I feel like I'm having an on-air epiphany, but I feel like my problem is I just sometimes can't get out of examination mode. Do you know what I mean? And I, like, of course you could just be like, oh yeah, no, I don't really know a lot about black holes or whatever. And like, but instead I'm like, oh no, then I get caught out. And like, then what? Like, you know, it's fine if someone's, you know, anyway. So I think that's my next frontier that I'm going to have to face is doing some kind of public engagement stuff, even though that terrifies me.
I mean, I think you'd be great at it. I think knowing that it's okay that you don't know the answer to any random question, that's the answer, I think. But I'm sure you'd be so great at the public presentations. It would be
I'm so glad you brought this up, because when you first said it, I was like, what, you just give a seminar, what, like, there's nothing to think about. And then you're like, but there's so much more to it than that. And
yeah, very interesting. Thanks for brainstorming on it with me.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.